Okay, I would like to call to order this special meeting of the Menlo Park Fire Protection District. My name is Chuck Bernstein, and the other directors will be identified as part of the roll call in just a moment. Michelle, could you go ahead with the roll call, please?
Director Bernstein,
Present.
Director Solano,
Here.
Director Jones is not on yet. Director Crawley,
Present.
Director McLaughlin.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag of the
Of the
United
United States of
States of
America,
America and to the
to the
republic
republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty and
and
justice
justice for all.
Thank you. I want to outline the nature of the meeting for a moment and the agenda that we will follow tonight. This is a study session, and it's the board's intent that no action will be taken tonight. We're here really to listen to the public and our constituents. So that's our intent for the meeting. In order to get through the entire meeting and to let everyone have an opportunity to speak, the speaker's time will be strictly enforced. And I'll describe the time for each portion of the agenda in just a moment. What we're going to do is for the public comments, which last 3 minutes, our clerk, Michelle Canayer, will signal when there's 30 seconds remaining. And for the 10-minute presentations by the volunteer organizations, she will signal when there is 1 minute remaining. When the time ends, the speaker will actually be muted. So it will be very formal in terms of continuing here. I don't know how many people are going to speak, how many different issues that we have here before you, but we want to be sure that we actually get through this tonight. And there'd be an opportunity, I presume, for people to speak a second time if they so wished, but at the very end of the meeting, if we still had time remaining. The meeting is scheduled for 7 to 9 o'clock, and it's my hope and intent to hold us to that 2-hour session. That is no longer than the 2-hour session. At the top of page 2 is the sub-agenda of our main agenda tonight. And the main agenda that was published indicated that this was a study session and that we would be discussing community preparedness and local volunteer organizations. But the sub agenda items, there are 5 of them. The first and last one, that is A and E, are brief comments by board members wanting to speak about what their expectations are and what they heard and so forth. But those will be very brief. I would hope that they would not exceed 1 to 2 minutes each. The B item is relates to comments about the constant study regarding community preparedness. This was a study that the board commissioned. The board had very high hopes for the information that would come from this study. And we've examined this and discussed it at previous meetings. I think in general, the board was not content with what was received from this study, the constant study, but we want to be sure that the public who may or may not have read it had a chance to comment on any of it. So that's our purpose tonight, but I want to be clear that the board did not endorse any of the findings in the report. They did not endorse any of the recommendations in the report, and they voted unanimously to consider it a draft report and not accept it as in its current form. So that'll be the first item, and speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. They'll have a 30-second warning, as I said previously. Item C here will be presentations by recognized community volunteer groups. I'm aware of 3 of them at this point. If I've missed someone, I'd like to hear about it, but at this point, we have presentations from the group in Atherton, in Menlo Park, and in East Palo Alto. That is, and they will have 10 minutes to talk about what, specifically here, regarding their needs for support by the fire district. We're interested in knowing what they would like to get from us in order to fulfill their missions. Then the 4th item on the agenda or sub-agenda here are public comments regarding the need for support by the fire district. So this is where individuals can speak, express their own personal feelings. These comments will be limited to 3 minutes, which is our normal public input time. And those speakers will get a warning 30 seconds before that's up. And then we conclude it with just some brief comments from the directors and so forth. So that's what will happen. But I'd like to just encourage our people who will be speaking to manage their time and to be sure they make their important points first, so that they don't lose them by going over the time limit. Just as a reminder, the focus of the meeting really is on our volunteer effort. That's the primary thing, although one agenda item includes any comments on the constant study. Reminder that at any one time, we have only 30 firefighters, roughly 30 firefighters on duty in the city, a few more than that. And during the busiest times of the day, we have roughly 100,000 people in the city. And it just isn't possible for 30 people to be helping 100,000. And that's why the role of volunteers is so important in terms of the immediate disaster response. So again, that's what the focus of this will be. So that's the setup for this. Let me ask the board members before they make their comments. Does anybody have any questions about how we're going to proceed tonight? Okay, well, let me then go to the board members and ask for any brief comments you have at the beginning. I'll start with our Vice President, Rob Solano.
Thank you, Chuck. And I'd like to thank everyone that's in attendance here tonight for this particular study session. This is the second time that we have met involving emergency preparedness in our volunteer groups. And the 2 major questions that I have, Chuck, is one, is the OEM function working for the volunteer groups? And then my second question is the role of the fire district adequate for the volunteer groups? And do they consider us a primary or support role in emergency preparedness? So those are basically, Chuck, the 2 major questions that I have. And I'd like to be able to, after the presentations, be able to ask them some specific questions to get a clarification, if that's all right with you, Chuck.
Well, let me just say, yeah, I didn't actually build in time for questions during the presentations, but I think let's see how our time goes.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Everyone.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't think about the actual questions, but if they finish early before they're allotted 10 minutes, we could certainly take questions then.
And a lot of the questions I think that I have, Chuck, will be answered with their presentations.
Okay.
So I think we'll be in good shape. So thank you, Chuck. That's all I have for my opening.
Okay. Virginia, would you like to make a statement?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank everyone who has been so involved in the community and emergency response and just volunteering their time for being here tonight. And I want to express my appreciation for all the work that you've done, not just in the last few years, but since I've been on the board for the last 10 years, all the things that you've done during that time. So thank you for that. I really just want to hear from everybody tonight and to get their thoughts. I know that we have some idea about, thoughts on the constant report, but I also want to hear how you think or what you would want the fire district to do. And I know we've heard from, the leaders of the 3 major groups, but I think volunteers who have been out in the field have some knowledge that they can impart to us as a board so that we can, and the chief, he's here and he's a new chief, so that we can improve, right? And Ryan Zollicoffer is here as well as Andres, because I do think that, one of the reasons that we're having this meeting is that, there can be some improvement. And as Rob said, I think this is the second time. The last time was, I want to say, back in 2013 when we've had this kind of a gathering in April of 2013. So that was quite a long time ago. And things have changed. Our environment has changed. We're constantly in preparation. But I'd like to hear what you think we can improve on from an exercise and practice perspective. What you think we need in terms of deployments and getting out in the field. I mean, this is nothing new. I've been harping on the DSA designation, but I think I'm probably the one person that's doing that. But I'd like to hear what your thoughts on and how you think we can deploy you and best use you and your expertise.
Thank you, Virginia. Robert, you have a comment, please?
Chuck, I just want to thank everyone for being here, especially the community representatives who are involved in CERT and other community members. It's always good to get input from individuals directly engaged in the process. I don't have any secret sauce that I want to spill out at this point in time. I'm just here to listen, to try to really clearly hear what people have to say. Because I know it's been 2020 when the last time we had this community meeting with the CERT representatives. And so things change. Time has passed. And so there's maybe new revelation that we have as a board have missed. So I'm just here to listen.
Thank you, Robert. Jim?
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. I don't want to repeat everything that's been said so far. I want to thank everyone for taking the time. As I've interacted with many of you, the passion and interest in this area is clear. I think we have a common goal, whether it's local government, the district, and the volunteer groups, of promoting a safe community for all of us who live here. We may differ on some of the methods on getting there. I'm anxious to listen tonight, hear some of the goals, and I hope if there's critique about what the district has or has not done, I'd like to hear that as well. So thank you very much. Thank
you, Jim. And I just like to second the welcome to everybody. Thank you for taking the time this evening. I've lived in this community since 1968, and I have seen firsthand the power of volunteers in my Willows neighborhood. I mean, volunteers were instrumental in ridding this area of drug dealing and violence and gunfire and so forth back in 1992, 30 years ago. And I know how powerful and effective volunteers can be. I'm trying to find a way to instill that into what we're doing in terms of disaster preparedness. So with that, I would like to then ask the public to provide any comments on the constant study. Again, remind you please that you have 3 minutes. You'll be reminded of that with 30 seconds remaining. And when the time is up, we will need to mute you. So please limit your comments to the 3 minutes. Michelle, will you please call on anybody with a hand up, or actually call on people to use the hand symbol and so forth?
Yes, if anybody has any public comment, please use the raise hand feature, or if you called in on a phone, you can press *9. Give it a moment. Last call for public comment. And I see none. Director Bernstein.
Okay, let me just give it a minute more here to make sure. So nobody came tonight wanting to make any comments on the study that we received from Constant Associates. Oh, there is a hand. There is a hand. And again, if anybody, again, I want to give time and make sure people have thought about this. There is a little at the bottom of your screen. You can, I think that's where it is. Raise your hand. And do you want to call on Tom, Michelle? Or shall I
Yes,
do
Tom,
that?
you're free to speak now. Oh, Tom, you're on mute. It shows your. Okay, can you try to unmute one more time?
Does he have to be listed as a host to speak, Michelle?
He doesn't need to be listed as a host to speak, but okay, Tom, on your end, there you go.
Can you hear me?
We
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay, my screen says the host is not allowing participants to unmute themselves.
Yes, I'm not allowing participants to
No,
unmute
that's fine.
themselves, but
I will not touch anything
Thank
until,
you.
until we're through. So anyway, good evening from Florida. I'm speaking at a conference out here this week, so but I'm glad to be able to make time for this. I appreciate the board, Chief Lawrenson, and the rest of my colleagues to take this time to listen to what we have to say. Now, the question was with respect to the constant comment report. I did not study it, to be honest, but what I was hoping to find in it was some actionable data. Here are the things that we studied, here are the things that we found, and preferably, here are the room for improvement. And I felt like it was lacking in that data set. Sure, it was in COVID. We at ADAPT were deployed, so I think that was a viable use case. I, for what it's worth, was not asked to interface with those folks, so my opinion wasn't requested or given to them. But I felt like it left a lot of unanswered questions and wasn't of exceptional value in terms of giving us the direction that one would ordinarily hire an outside resource like that for. So perhaps that's why the board acted it the way they did, and maybe we're going to see this draft turn into some additional data. But you'd ask for comments on that, and those would be mine.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else in the meantime wants to speak on the this item A on the agenda? Okay, it looks like not. So we will move then to item B, which is the,
See,
I'm sorry, C, which is the comments from the groups. And if you don't mind, Tom, since you're calling from Florida, are you speaking on behalf of ADAPT? Will you be speaking for ADAPT? Yes, okay. So I'm going to do this in alphabetical order of the that is Atherton first, East Palo Alto second, and Menlo Park third. So remember, please, we set a limit of 10 minutes. If you could limit your comments to that, we would greatly appreciate it. And more than that won't be heard anyway. So Tom, please proceed.
Sure. I'm not moving to Florida. I'm just here for the week. So representing ADAPT, we're very fortunate to be closely aligned with and have a long history with the Atherton Police Department. So when we get activated, which we were during the early months of COVID, to really just check on our neighbors, we are in line for the DSW designation. So we feel very fortunate for that. I've been around ADAPT since 2010. I became president after the retirement of Mr. Pressing, who I believe is on this call, in January of this year. We have a relatively new board and we're trying to put our feet underneath us. But what we have done is really tried to simplify our primary focus for ADAPT going forward. And really it centers around 3 C's. And the first one is community. I just really want our neighbors and our residents to be, I like to say, morally obligated to check on their neighbors 3 doors down in either direction. If we can get that hyper-local focus, we can begin to expand that, and that's going to lead to the next C, which is communication. And communication is exactly what we're talking about. It's FRS radios, it's ham radio, it's training on what to see, what to look for, what do you see, hear, smell, these types of things. So how can people be effective when they're moving 3 doors or 4 doors in any direction, really just to care about their neighbors. The third C that we're focusing on is capabilities. And that is obviously check yourself, check your family, check your home, and then check your street. But what is it you're truly capable of doing? And I don't want to put people in a position of a false sense of security or a false sense of hope or really bringing victims to a disaster. So I want to be very clear with our residents, and our board feels this way, that these are the things that you feel capable of doing, and that's what we want you to do. So that's the background on ADAPT. And I believe, Director Bernstein, this is the question where you'd like us to say some things we would like to see from the district.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So I think some of the things the district can do, and then I'll talk about a couple of things that I would like for us to do. One is, I think the district would benefit from a much clearer message surrounding what the mission of the OEM or the CERT group is relative to their goals and objectives for and within the community. And then how does the district plan to achieve those goals? What do you want to do? How are you going to get there? What are you not going to do? And then, no excuses like, well, we can't do this and this thing. Just tell us what you want to do so we can all get on that same page. Really what I'm after is that we all collectively have a same sheet of music for the district and the working groups and really the community at large as well. I'd like the district to play the role of curating emergency preparedness content from the city level, the county level, the state level, and the federal level. And as we all know, CERT, as an example, is a federal standard. Red Cross Ready, Stop the Bleed, all of these wonderful tools that are available to us. I would like, instead of the various community groups trying to go get people to do what we want them to do, to teach us these things and find these classes and organize and stretch, which we can do, but it would be great if the district played a role as that central hub, that library, if you will, of content available to the community, and not just ADAPT or the community groups, but the community at large. And what we in ADAPT bring to the table is a group of like-minded emergency preparedness individuals that want to learn. And that would allow my group to continue to learn up into their capabilities. If there's a cadre of people that want to do more within the framework that OEM provides, that's awesome, right? Let's let those people excel and extend into that. Further, I'd like along those lines to see a rolling 12-month calendar of events and content that's offered to the community from OEM, not a linked Google calendar somewhere on a web page, but I mean, let's get together and sit down and have a dialogue on a planning session of what we want to do, what sorts of trainings would be more important in the spring versus the summer versus the fall versus the winter. Wildfire season is, I guess, no longer a season, but there are things that we should understand about flooding in the winter and wildfires in the summer. So that's, I think with that framework in place, we could be a lot more effective. I feel ADAP would be a much better partner to the district if we had that sort of framework. Specific to ADAP, and this is where I get to ask for things, beyond the 12-month calendar, I'd like the district to host the annual drill. Somehow it became an ADAP thing. Last year, there were, I believe, and others would know better, 140 or 180 some odd people, and certainly they weren't all from ADAP, and they weren't all from from within the district. So if we can get back to the time when the district was hosting this and we had a calendar and we had a curriculum and it ended in a drill, then the ADAPT people and the MPC Ready people and the REPACT people and the community at large, and maybe it's the North Faroes, we can all get together, work shoulder to shoulder, and like the old days of AYSO for my kids, you get to meet people from other parts of your community and go from there. So I'm a fan of that idea. The other two things that I want is, if you let me ask, we've got 3 trailers now with emergency cash supplies in it. We'd like to add 2 trailers to our list. What we use these trailers for is we're going to be converting them from the notion of hooking them up to someone's truck and moving them somewhere, is we want to centrally locate 4 trailers in the community, one in Lindenwood, one in the Holbrook Palmer Park area, one in the Menlo Circus Club area, and a 4th one up on Walsh Road area. We feel that those areas, certainly Walsh Road, are going to be somewhat closed off. I'm working with doctors and folks who live in those areas to host and sort of adopt these trailers to maintain them and the contents within them. So that would be the big ask. The other thing is the district has a sort of a surplus, if you will, of unused ham radios and GMRS radios. I would like to get one of those, each of those ham and GMRS in these trailers I mentioned, so that we have a communications hub in at least 4 areas. Beyond that, what we're going to do for all of this, among other things, is the communication. We're going to be continuing to host communication drills within ADAPT, and we want to train our folks to recruit and train ham radio operators to set up that net, if you will, of ham radio backbone for communications, but really down to that capillary level of having homeowners have those old family ski radios we have laying around. And if they buy new ones to refresh them, that's great. But go out to the end of your driveway, look left, look right, get on that FRS radio, because that's going to be the way, if communications are down, that the information seen and the needs communicated that ultimately make it to the EOC, which we'd love to find out where that's going to be. I know Atherton has a new one coming online, which we're excited about, but I think at a higher level, the EOC needs to be sorted out, or at least I'm not aware of what the sorting is. So directors and chief and my colleagues, thank you for this time. That would be the bulk of my list. If you have any questions, let me know.
Michelle, how much time is left on Tom's speaking?
1 minute and 41 seconds.
Okay, let me ask board members if you have any questions for Tom. I have one, Tom. I was just curious. I have no idea, but when you asked for the 2 more trailers, do you have any idea what that would cost?
I don't, Director Bernstein. The number I've heard floating around, but I have not verified it, is in the neighborhood of $8,000 to $10,000 for the medical trailer. But since we want to rearrange, if you will, or slightly re-provision them, I don't know what that number would be. So I mean, I'll have to continue to work on that and let you know. But I appreciate you bringing that up. And if I could go further, the 5th trailer, if you're doing the math, is more of a community outreach trailer, which would have some of these cash elements to it.
1 minute remaining.
Got it. We want to use this trailer to host, if you will, micro parties in the community. Again, it's about community. I don't need neighbors to be best friends. I just need them to recognize each other and feel morally obligated to check. So with that, we want to put donated wine, a big cooler full of seltzer waters and some cheese and a charcuterie board or whatever. But we'll bring this representation of ADAPT and our preparedness to your cul-de-sac, to your driveway. We'll host a little cocktail party, if you will, in the street, just so folks can recognize each other and get to know each other a little bit better.
Okay. Any other question? Rob, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for participating. I really appreciate it. When you, I'm interpreting your role as the fire district to be the primary source of emergency preparedness or a support role.
So my role within ADAPT, and I think the role of ADAPT to be supportive. Did I have your question right?
No, my question is the role of the fire district. The way I interpreted it was that the fire district is the primary for emergency prep, and that's the way I interpret it. Do you think the fire district should be the primary or in a support role for emergency prep?
I think what I'd like to see the district do is prepare and curate the content about emergency preparedness. For example, stop the bleed, CPR, first aid, CERT training. I would like to see the district curate and offer those classes to the community. What ADAPT will do is bring together, perhaps we could have a place to do it in the pavilion in our park, but really we've got, some number of community-minded folks.
I'm going to bring it to a close here because we're over our time now. Thank you. I know you were responding to Rob's question, but I want to keep it as close to 10 minutes as possible. So
Thank you, Joe.
Everything done.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know I see that we have a couple people here from REPAC, the East Palo Alto group. I saw Isaac Stevenson, I see Dennis Parker, and I know Robert Jones is a member. Who is speaking for REPAC? Is anybody?
Somebody could use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen.
Dennis
Parker.
would talk.
Dennis
Okay.
Parker.
You're on mute, Dennis.
You should be able to unmute yourself now, Mr. Parker. There you go.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Dennis Parker. I'm one of the co-chairs of the REPAC group. This is the East Palo Alto group. Just to set the stage, let me say that the Menlo Park Fire Protection District serves a very socially, economically diverse population. One of the most affluent towns in Northern California exists alongside one of the most underserved communities in the same district. The neighborhood volunteer groups emerged when it became clear that the one-size-fits-all CERT model does not serve a diverse population very well. Thus, REPAC was created in East Palo Alto, and MPC Ready was created in Menlo Park. Within the fire district, CCM was created with little collaboration with local volunteers. It felt like empire building and the addition of yet another bureaucratic layer. Unfortunately, CERT OEM inherited some of this legacy. A few years ago, the CERT program sponsored by the Menlo Park Fire District did evolve into REPAC. We call ourselves a Resilient East Palo Alto Community Team to better reflect that each city is unique as we celebrate a resilient community supporting the cultural attributes that make East Palo Alto special. Now, concerning our goals for 2022, we plan to establish a neighborhood disaster communication network, conduct communication simulation exercises, complete a community preparedness plan consisting of assessment of neighborhoods, a neighborhood action plan, and finalizing 3 locations for command posts within the community. We are currently working with Cal OES on what they call Prepare CA grant. We're working on an application in collaboration with climate resilient communities that are concerned with flooding and protection of the wildlife, as well as Nuestra Costra for disaster preparedness funding to support community capacity building, public education, and the creation of a community preparedness plan, as I mentioned above. We are also engaged in a radio communication study using GMRS radio technology to increase the range of FRS radios. Most FRS radios today also include GMRS channels, and their GMRS channels can actually match or exceed the capability of ham radios and at a lesser cost. So I'll let you know as we develop this concept. And finally, we're working on becoming a 501c3 organization so that we can better accept contributions and grants. But as you know, this can be a rather lengthy and expensive process. In terms of what you folks can do for us, we need help in interacting with the city of East Palo Alto. City managers in the past have not shown much interest in emergency preparedness or interacting with CERT. Right now, we have no city manager, no police chief, and the city has a high turnover of staff and are likely not to be up to date on disaster preparedness training. All are not likely to have ICS 100 training, which they should. Senior staff members should be trained in ICS 100, 200, 700, and 800, according, of course, to their particular function. But there is no accountability. The same thing applies to joint exercises. There doesn't seem to be an accountability when these exercises don't happen when they are planned. Right now, the city offices are still closed because of the pandemic. We need a clear understanding of who will activate our volunteer group during a disaster response. There's not enough translation services for a population where the primary language of 60% of the residents is not English. Most of these residents are Latinos, but there's also a very large number of Tongan, Samoan, and what's the third one? Well, let's stay with Tongan or Fiji, Tongan, Samoan, and Fiji. These are Pacific Islander cultures. We also need a clear understanding of DSW and who will administer it. This has been going on for about 10 years, and there's been a lot of finger pointing back and forth. And of course, this is essential in order to protect volunteers who are serving the community under the fire district, but need to have protection from injuries such as happens in the civilian community. We also need, in addition to Elizabeth Lamb, we also need someone from the city to become a member of the Emergency Managers Association, someone at the level of an assistant city manager, police commander, public works director, or someone higher than that. Elizabeth Lamb has done a very good job. She's an incredibly efficient coordinator, but she cannot go head to head with city managers and people at that level at these meetings. We also need the city to restore the MOUs that the city had to cover the American Red Cross, ARRL, which is the ham radio national organization, and with the fire district, including CERT. Somehow these things dropped off with the last update of the city's emergency operation plan. We also need to provide, we need for the city to provide access to a CERT liaison and a ham radio operator in the EOC or the incident command post. Otherwise, there's no way for the community to report damage assessment that they collect when the teams go door to door. There is no way to get this information into the EOC. And without that, there's no point in having a CERT program where you go door to door to collect damage assessment. Funding is always a need. We don't have a budget here, but obviously funding is something that we could get help from the fire district. So I'm about out of time, but I wanted to say that I agree with Tom Owen that we should have a training schedule that has a continuity for the series of related topics that are to be presented, a calendar and a logical progression from one topic to another. We also have problems with our emergency caches, but I will say the details of that for later, but just to say that we have one emergency cache. Nobody has access to the cache. The inventory for the cache is not clear, but I do know enough that a lot of the materials there, a lot of the equipment that is perishable has not been maintained. So with that, I'll end this presentation and be prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dennis. Michelle, how much time does Dennis have left on his?
1 minute exactly.
Okay, we have time for a quick question. If there's anybody on the board that would like to ask a quick question of Dennis? Let me just say that we're slightly ahead of schedule, which is good. And I foresee that toward the end of the meeting, after we've completed the scheduled agenda, we can come back to questions. So Dennis, I hope you'll stay on the broadcast here because there may be more questions at the end.
I will.
Thank you. Okay, and then we have from Menlo Park, Lynn is here and is prepared to speak on behalf of MPC Ready. We're not hearing you yet, Lynn, so
yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I would like to share some slides that I sent, if that's okay, Michelle.
It is. Give me 1 moment to make you
Okay.
a co-host so that you have the ability to do that. Okay, you should be free to do that now.
Okay. Let's see. Well, I had them right up on my screen. Just a second. Sorry. Bear with me. Let's see. Here it is. Can you see that now?
No, we don't see anything yet.
Okay.
You'll have to hit the green share button, remember.
Okay, just a second. Here we go.
We still don't, oh, there, it's coming on now.
Okay, all right. So I'm Lynn Bramlett. I'm a founding member of MPC Ready, and there were others. And I became an early leader and now the director. So I think what's important is that we all establish a vision for a resilient community. And then I want to talk a little bit about models of disaster preparedness and touch on areas that I definitely think could improve our value to the community and then support requests. So it's not advancing for me. Let's, okay, here we go. Okay, do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't disagree with what I heard from my counterparts. A number of what items they said, I could say it too. I think I spoke with Los Altos today. the same volunteers who were involved before, but now they have a program called Resilient Los Altos. And this came from them because, you know, this is a public meeting, so I want to be careful in my comments, but I think it's time to examine our model. And their model has been completely overhauled. Some people are different. The volunteers are still there, but they stress that it's volunteer run, it's bottoms up, and they work very actively with the government. In fact, at the end of my presentation in the appendix, I took a screenshot from their new website, and yeah, it's not smoke and mirrors. I mean, it's really a whole community working together with groups like Neighborhood Watch, the fire district, the city government. That's the kind of model I'd like to see. And it's a model that recognizes the limited number of first responders and the importance of trained volunteers. And that's something we want to stress too with, you know, radio communications, et cetera. And our model is based on best practices elsewhere. I would say whenever we see them, it's fundamentally the same. We're focused on neighborhood level preparedness, but the piece that hasn't been working is the model with the government. It could be better. So what is our model? Is our model going to be a collaborative model or another type of model where one agency runs the show and makes all the decisions with a command and control approach, do it my way and stay out of my way? And, you know, volunteers get in the way of first responders. I've seen this in reports that have been prepared in the back room. Actually, the district disaster response guidelines are, they positioned it that way. So I think it's time to, you know, really take a look at what we have in place and what could be better. And it's, the moment is timely. So I have long, sorry, I'm having some technical trouble here. I request number one, evolve our current model. And I think that'll take the keep, you know, stakeholders sitting together, you know, discussion, you know, in a business-like way, based on research, national policy, best practices. I know for a fact this is a national trend because I belong to the California Emergency Services Association. I go to the San Mateo County Emergency Managers Association, and I'm personally very big on research. I turn to that whenever there's, to me, that's your first solution to everything. Start researching. So I think we could better coordinate the CERTs, HAMs, and neighborhood level preparedness efforts. There's a certain amount of duplication of effort, an effort that could be better coordinated. Like I see in Los Altos, I would say Palo Alto and other groups, and the residents need a seat at the decision-making table. I would say our current model has been really top down. And I want to increase the collaboration, communication, coordination, cooperation across the whole community. Now, Menlo Park has brought an emergency preparedness coordinator in-house, and 2 other people focus, or they are bringing them in-house. They made a decision to hire 3 more staff directly focused on disaster preparedness. I have long, based on, you know, studies, et cetera, believe that disaster preparedness should belongs in-house in Menlo Park in terms of that particular jurisdiction. Of course, working with other parts of the system. So they're adding somebody. I'm, you know, very happy about that. And that is a response to national trends and, you know, seeing more up close, some, you know, some of the problems that are there. I personally think the trained certs, like in other jurisdictions, should report into a local government entity, because to me, that's what many do, if not maybe most, because it adds an extra layer if you have them reporting into a fire district and then the jurisdiction calls for the people. I think just to touch a little bit, we'd also like fairness and be treated fairly and not to have efforts that work against us. So we have a certain amount of what I'll call unnecessary headwind, like having the CERT instructor tell a group of 17 people that Ryan and Andres have been working really hard to have all the volunteer groups report into them and quote, "The day is coming and the day is coming soon." I mean, I was on that call. I heard it personally. So did a council member Taylor, Cecilia Taylor. And that kind of statement is very demoralizing, as is also scheduling CERT training or other trainings to conflict with the community-based meetings. We don't have that many. Our monthly meeting is an hour and 15 minutes per month. I would hope that could be worked around, but that's just an example where we've raised concerns and issues in a business-like professional way, and there's no change. And another example is this volunteer forum that's taking place tomorrow. I got another invitation today. It's the same agenda every month. We've been unable to suggest an agenda topic. There's no minutes, no action items. And maybe I learned a few things I didn't know because I'm not invited to the CERT meetings anymore. Haven't been for months, but it's just not effective. So, I think we really need to take a look and whatever went on in the past is the past. Let's start a new future. That's kind of a more collaborative one. And then my last slide here, again, I'm having some technical. So in terms of MPC Ready, we bring a lot of value. We're very focused on organizing neighborhoods, and studies show just knowing your neighbors improves resiliency. Of course, trained volunteers are even better, but these efforts help. They're cost efficient, they're complementary. It totally plugs into the overall puzzle of what we're trying to build here. And it's also linked to hastening a community's comeback after a disaster. And in addition, organized neighborhoods improve a desirability and livability of a community. It reduces crime, typically increases property values. And I would say I'm even seeing it helping to bridge political polarization, because neighbors aren't afraid to talk to each other, and raise issues that they wouldn't otherwise. In terms of where we are, I think we've made tremendous strides. That again, we've been supported. Our very generous counterpart groups have been wonderful. We're still here. We could have turned the lights out months ago, or a year ago. We have a foundation that's growing. We have the respect of, I think, most elected officials familiar with our work. And we had a very successful, for example, disaster preparedness event with the Newcomers Club. We had probably close to 70 people there. I had to help with slides, so I couldn't take a count, but I've talked with people and we had surveys, and it's already led to follow-up action. I invited 2 counterparts based on where the people who attended live. The club is kind of in our area, so based on the cities they came from, I did that. We're having a blood drive with Trinity Church.
1 minute remaining.
And we have a lot of things in the queue. So, we have momentum, and I am seeing a tremendous increase in people who want to get together, block parties, build in preparedness. So how can you help us? We would love your financial support. I submitted a budget request for $10K. If that's too much, please, just dial it back with your comfort level. We'd also like a seat at the decision-making table. And we'd like open discussion of our area's disaster preparedness model and next steps, and then a collaborative meeting structure, with action items noted and minutes published. So transparency and collaboration. And I'll end here in case you have questions for me.
Lynn, I don't, Jim, go ahead, please.
Lynn, I see you put in a request for funding from the district. Are you requesting funding from the city of Menlo Park as well?
I think we will, actually. Early on, one of the council members suggested that, so we certainly could. Now we have the budget prepared and we could do that. So we haven't gotten to that yet, but we can.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. And just to confirm, when you speak about the budget, Lynn, we board members at least received something today in our email that has a budget, and that's the one you're referring to. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And the total, if I'm not mistaken, is about a $30,000 budget. Is that?
No, it's 18,270.
Okay.
And we have some money already, and we could certainly ask, for example, 5K from you, 5K from the city of Menlo Park.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to be sure that we had the right document. Thank you very much. Well, that constituted the three primary groups that we're aware of. I'm aware that there are some other people that are perhaps doing some local neighborhood things, and they certainly would be welcome to speak at the next part of our agenda here in terms of any needs that they might have. So I'm going to move to that. This is item D on the sub-agenda. The public comments regarding the need for support by the fire district. So a reminder that we'll have hands raised and give 3 minutes to each speaker, and there'll be a 30-second warning. And so I'd like to move to that and get people to raise their hands. Michelle, would you like to instruct people on how to be recognized?
Yes, if anybody has any public comments, you can engage the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you called in, you can press *9. Okay, we do have a speaker, so give me one moment. Ms. Connolly, I think you can unmute yourself now.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can. So
Great. As with Chuck, I've actually lived here. I grew up here and had the privilege of buying my first and only house here in the area. And I'm really heartened to see the level of work that's being done on all different levels. Most notably, I have to give a big hats off to our two Toms, Tom Pressing and Tom Owen, and also to Lynn. For the first time ever, I'm seeing traction as a resident and as a community organizer in community preparedness, but it's very clearly bottoms up. And with my business as a marketing expert to high-tech companies, including the Fortune 100, down to startups, I'm feeling we have a missed opportunity here of bridging the middle, where we've got people whose mission and purpose and careers are based on providing emergency services. And then there's a kind of like the squishy middle where it's not connecting to the people who can really help augment the professionals in an event of a catastrophic or even a medium-sized emergency. I'd also like to point out that unique to this area is we have highly skilled, highly educated, technically savvy, super connected people. I actually have a community of 72,000 people I do kind of in my spare time. So we want to be able to make sure that we have a way of augmenting and assisting those who are charged with this emergency preparedness with the skills and talents that reside in this community for people who are already embedded, connected, and already doing things on their own neighborhood level. So I want to say ADAPT is excellent. I attended the training during the summertime and I was super impressed. I did get CERT trained probably about 15 years ago and never heard boo ever since. And I think we missed a key opportunity when COVID did break out to engage those people who are trained in CERT to go out and be the boots on the streets. My sister, who is NERT trained, which is what they have in San Francisco, as soon as COVID broke out, they had people going out door to door, putting on door hangers and reaching out to everyone. I actually just did door to door with my own neighborhood to make sure those who were vulnerable were all set. But that was just kind of a common sense thing. And I just think that
30 seconds remaining.
I'm sorry, rather than looking at COVID as being the excuse for the not doing some things, the COVID was really our opportunity to test out our emergency preparedness. So I just would love to make sure that we leverage best practices from other organizations and adjacent cities. And most importantly, get our residents ready, because we also have tens of thousands of employees that we need to take care of if they're stranded in an emergency. And one just final thing, I'm doing some work with Ukrainian assistance in Poland, and there aren't refugee camps. People took 2 million refugees into their homes. So the power of people stepping up can't be overlooked. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. Do we have other hands raised? Anybody else from the public would like to give comments about how the fire district could assist with disaster preparedness? I want to be clear, when the business of the fire district is emergencies. Every day there's an emergency, but a disaster is an extraordinary event that happens once a year or less. So we're not talking about just ordinary emergencies that the professionals handle. We're talking about the ones where the professionals are overwhelmed with needs all over the community. Michelle, will you make another call, please?
Yes, we have another speaker, Mr. Stevenson. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
I hope that will do that.
Isaac, we can hear you now. Thank
Yeah,
you.
okay. I'm one of those seniors that the computers have changed so much since COVID started that I can barely deal online, but I've been listening. And I look at the idea of confusion over how and when we're supposed to be doing things, but I don't think the majority, I don't know what you're doing. And how do we connect to the audience that needs to be getting to you? I grew up here during the 50s. Was the fourth, family of color on my street. Played Little League, went to Kavanaugh, went to kindergarten at Kavanaugh. All of that to say, we used to communicate with each other. It was through our schools and different things, and there were different cultures, but it just seems that we don't communicate. People used to go to each other's homes, visit and get to know each other. I've worked with a number of the different organizations, and I'm also a county ombudsman, and we need your help. I talk about density. I wonder how many people can sit in this area and be safe if we have to evacuate with all the cars on our streets. We have a lot of problems throughout the Bay Area, but this is the community I love most in the world. So I want to know more of what you're doing. I've seen trucks, hook and ladder trucks from San Francisco drive through. I know you all are constantly training. I was a repair party leader on an aircraft carrier during Vietnam period. I actually had to, prior to that, actually fight a fire, and I worked. And it's about, and I've been locked below decks, but I think, and I'm a CERT member, and I've done all the training, and I've really appreciated what you all have given me. I've also been a junior fire marshal. And think about how as a child I was reached, and I went, like I said, I went to kindergarten at Kavanaugh, and I knew Tom Kavanaugh and his mother and the family. What I'm really saying is we don't know each other yet. And just saying we want to have a party, maybe we need to get together and have barbecues, or at least start talking together. This is great what you're doing, but how many seniors or people who might be at home during a disaster will really know what to do if they haven't, talked to you? And I like what the other young lady was saying. I'm having my own mental health issues, but I think of how
30 seconds remaining.
And I've been rambling, but I keep thinking how we're in one of the best places in the world. And I've been all over the world. I've worked with the ministries of health in Africa, and I work for a big biotech company. But we need to start talking and training each other and get together. I guess that's all I could say. It's not about money, it's about possible lives. The cities, I think of what's happening. But I'll shut up. I love y'all.
Thank you, Isaac. Michelle, can you call again, please? Or...
If any other members of the public wish to provide a comment, please engage the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you called in, you could press *9. Last call for public comment. And I see none, Director Bernstein.
Okay, well, I'm going to reserve about, say, 15 minutes for board members to make their wrap-up comments. But before I do that, I'm going to ask for board members to ask questions of our speakers. So this is not personal comments. This is really for questions. I know that I kind of hastened the response of I actually don't remember who was asking the question. I think Jim asked the question of somebody, and who was that, Jim, that you were asking?
Lynn Bramlett.
Oh, okay. Lynn, did you get to finish your answer to Jim's question?
Yes, I have. So the budget was prepared for tonight, but earlier I had talked with one of the council members regarding support, and the person said, financial support. So that can be a next direction. We're kind of like a startup, and a lot of things we're working on, but I think that would be good for me to ask them to support us and send them a similar letter. Did that answer your question? We would like them to recognize us, but I was hoping they would add on a senior level disaster manager. And I agree with Director Bernstein's. Our focus is on disasters, not so much day-to-day emergency preparedness. That can be helpful, and that's part of it. So does that answer your question? Did I answer it?
It did. Chuck, if we have time, Chuck, I'd like to expand on it a bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
Lynn, what's your reaction to the idea that if the city has the authority and responsibility to activate volunteer resources in the event of a disaster, what's your reaction to the idea of the funding coming from the city rather than the district? The district could, perhaps the city could ask for grants from the district. But my thought behind that is, when we start talking about radios or caches of equipment and whatnot, shouldn't the body that has responsibility for activating and controlling the volunteers be responsible for those requests so that we have continuity and standardization?
I don't disagree with you, and we would like to be more aligned with the city of Menlo Park. I don't think they have that piece in place. We would like a model like Los Altos, Palo Alto. I go to their trainings, and I'm going to go to the Los Altos ones too, and we want to replicate them. If we got everyone ready in a neighborhood, we want to start practicing with FRS, and they use this other type of radio too that Tom Owen mentioned, but we don't have that government piece in place in terms of where would we send the information on up. So there's some real structural things to talk about. And yes, I think the city of Menlo Park should support us, but as a taxpayer, I have to ask what the public is getting for the nearly 1.4 million budget that I see for the OEM program and also CERT. So, I think most of what we're doing, we pay for that. It's fund as you go, that we have some money come in. But just to answer succinctly, yes, I do think Menlo Park should, but I also would like to see good stewards of the taxpayers' money for the OEM and CERT program. And working together, we could certainly extend the reach. I do also want to do a shout out for Carol Parker. I had never met her before, and just spontaneously when I started, people would say, oh, I trained, she was so accommodating. She'd come out to the church or the community center, and I ran into her at the Earth Day Festival in Flood Park and chatted about this volunteer or social event with educational, and she expressed support. And the city council expressed that too at that 2012 meeting when the former chief talked to them about turning emergency management over to the fire district. Carol Parker was flagged as somebody they trusted and had confidence in. She had more of that collaborative approach, apparently. So that's the piece we need.
Okay, thank you.
Let me ask other board members, any questions that you'd like to, Rob, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. Yeah, some of the things that I'd like to see, okay, is, and Chuck, you and I had discussed a request or grant form to be presented to the fire district with a justification for funding or equipment or training. And, you know, was that ever completed where there is a form to OEM for these requests, or is it just in a memorandum form?
Are you asking me that question, Rob?
Well, I'll probably have to direct it to staff
Well, I think this
or
may not-
Ryan or.
I think, let me say, I think we should just keep the meeting sort of in the same format that we've got without it being, staff oriented here. But I think the answer was, there was a draft of the form that you're talking about, but the board had not set aside any budget for that, and the board had not established any procedure for making such an award. And I think that's where it stopped. There was no way that the OEM group could start awarding things without a budget and an authorization to proceed.
Yeah.
But I think
Right.
that's a program that certainly could be considered, and the board could certainly put that on the agenda for us to consider.
It just seems like, Lynn prepared a, very, very well written document for justification for funding that she wants, but does her request answer all the questions that we should have as a board to justify the funding, or to justify the training, or to justify certain types of equipment? So that's where I'm at with that. And another thing, Chuck, I like to see an accreditation, some type of accreditation for our OEM program. I know there are avenues in which we could get accredited through it. And, those are the two concerns basically that I have. And the main thing is, are we going to be the primary, or are we going to be in a support role in this emergency management function? So those are the three questions I have, Chuck. Thank you.
Okay. With respect to Rob's question, would any of the organizations like to address that? Tom or Dennis? I'm not mentioning Lynn because she was just speaking to it. Okay. What about other questions from the, go ahead, Tom.
Oh. Tom, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Seems after 2 years of Zoom calls, I should have this figured out. Yeah, thank you, Director Solano. I mean, I think that the role at a high level is collaborative, that we have a unique element, I think, in the town of Atherton with our residents, and ADAPT. I think there's a difference between us and the others. And I think that it's not a one size fits all, as was stated earlier, but the district is very good at what it does. And my goal for my group that I'm representing currently is that we don't bring victims to the disaster, that we get best practices from those in the know, which is, in my opinion, the district and the folks you have on staff. And we work together to bring that information to our residents so that they are more resilient to the disaster that will come, not if, but when, and we minimize the impact of that disaster. So that's kind of the high level of how I view this.
Okay, other questions? I was going to ask Dennis, Dennis, from a political standpoint, one of the things you asked for initially was some help dealing with your city council and to help you, to help REPAC become engaged with the city council and so forth. My question is that these are difficult political things, as you might imagine, in terms of different jurisdictions and so forth. How do you have any thought of what the fire district might do with the city council? In other words, yeah, just any kind of advice on how we would do that. I mean, I don't think the city council wants to take direction from the fire board or from the, you know, the management of the fire district. How would we influence East Palo Alto, or what could we do? How could we do it so that it would be politically acceptable and would be received well?
Actually, it's not the city council, it's more technically the city government, the city manager and his departments, the planning department, the admin department, the finance department, public works, police, and those agencies. By default, the city manager is the emergency preparedness manager, unless somebody else is appointed. Sometimes it can be the police chief or someone else, but traditionally it's the city manager. Our city manager, who just left or was in the process of leaving, and those before him showed very little interest in doing anything involving emergency preparedness. You can add this budget thing to that list of things that they didn't seem to be responsive to. To me, the city government does not have any accountability. It should be the city council that oversees the city government, but sometimes city council, sometimes politicians can behave in a way that they conduct themselves by allowing the city to prepare an agenda package for the meeting, give them all of the background, give the recommended outcome of it, and then the city council just votes up or down for it, and that's their contribution to the city. So oftentimes they don't really oversee the behavior of the city manager or the departments. So I can't influence them. I'm just one guy who was a thorn in their side for the last 10 years. But I think they will listen to the fire district and the fire chief, who says to them, we need to get together and figure out how to do some of these things. DSW is one example. Without DSW, volunteers that are put in harm's way are not going to be covered in a workman's compensation way. They may not even be activated, excuse me, because we haven't figured out who would be the agency to activate them. So there are a lot of things that need to be done. But city governments have a funny way of behaving. If they don't want to be bothered with you, they just won't return your phone calls. If you go to the office to try to meet them in person, the gatekeeper will say, you have to have an appointment to meet with them. And you say, well, how do I get an appointment? And they say, well, here's the card, call them. And then you tell them, I came here because they wouldn't answer the phone. So folks in government can get pretty lazy, and you can see it in all forms of government. So I can't do anything, but I think somebody with some clout, with some influence, like the fire chief, like the fire board, like someone at the county government, somebody, let's say within the sheriff's Office of Emergency Management, can influence them and say, let's get together and make sure that the city is supporting the people who have volunteered to be there and to make a contribution during a disaster.
I asked this question, Dennis, because this year, in addition to my role as president of the board, I am the liaison to the city of East Palo Alto. And just for your information, and anybody else who's, from East Palo Alto or whatever, we have in the past, not during the pandemic, but we have in the past had joint meetings with the city councils or town councils of our constituent jurisdictions. About 2 weeks ago, we had one of those meetings with the town of Atherton. I contacted, and because of the turnover in the city of East Palo Alto, I contacted all the council members, and I contacted the acting city manager to ask them if they would like to have a joint meeting with our fire board. I acknowledged the turnover and the difficulties and the efforts they were making to get replacement people, and that perhaps on top of all this, they're doing the housing element and some other things as well. And I acknowledged that it might be a very busy time, but of the 6 people I contacted, I haven't had a single response from anyone at this point. Again, I understand why that might be, but I wanted you to know that the fire board, we discussed this at one of our meetings, and the fire board did feel that it was important to reach out, in this case, to both the city of Menlo Park and the city of East Palo Alto, just as we had to the city, the town of Atherton. So we're interested, I think, in having such a joint meeting. And when we had the meeting with Atherton, I would say that half the meeting, it was involved with how to energize the volunteer groups. And there were some commitments made by both our staff, our board, and also by the town council to do just that. So I think that's one avenue that we could follow here. But we can't make that happen unilaterally.
That's fine, Chuck. There's a lot of people doing things, a lot of meetings and so forth, but I would get very specific in order to test the process. I would do things like ask them, show me the MOU for CERT in your emergency operations plan. Show me the completion certificates for all of your employees for the ICS 100 training course. Show me the provisions for DSW. Who is the administrator? How is it underwritten? Do the people? How do you swear in people? There's a swearing in a process when you activate it. So how do you swear in people once they are out and about trying to rescue people? How do you administer that oath? Do the CERT people understand what happens if they're injured? What are the forms that they have to fill out? What types of injuries are covered? What is the maximum payout for injuries? What is the deadline for submitting a claim if you're injured? So ask for those specific things. I mean, you can have a meeting and talk about this and that, but when you get down to the nitty gritty that's going to matter, some of these things may be missing. I can give you a list of the things that I'm concerned about, but they will be very, very specific, very, very specific. Who's going to do what? How do we get situation reports, damage assessment reports into the EOC, where they can be acted upon by the commander, the incident commander, the public works director, the police. Right now, there's no way to get in because we haven't been invited in. Asked to see the joint exercises that they have in their annual calendar of activities, where they're supposed to every quarter have a joint meeting with the community, a joint exercise with the community, and look at those reports and see how many times they have missed the deadline and postponed it or pushed it out because they didn't have the people or the resources to do it. So they push it out for the next quarter, and they push it out quarter after quarter until it falls off the calendar. So there are many years when they had a quarterly activity that never happened because it's pushed out until it just doesn't exist anymore. So those are specific things that should be on the record that aren't being done. I've been here longer than most of the people in the city now. And while I was tracking that, I just didn't see any activity. It was actually going backwards because some things were lost in the documentation as the annexes in the emergency operation plan. They have no idea what I'm talking about because they weren't there when it existed. They weren't there when it dropped off as the plan was updated. So if you'd like, I can give you a list of my concerns, and maybe you can make those specific items when you talk to them. They can show you their best intentions, but right now, I truly don't believe that the city is prepared to respond to a major disaster. They don't have the training on record. They don't have a relationship with volunteer organizations such as ours. I think they have a mandatory tabletop exercise somewhere at the end of the year or the beginning of the new year, but they won't invite CERT members there. They won't invite HAM members there because they say this is for government organizations only. So there has never in 10 years been a joint exercise between the city and the CERT members, maybe the Red Cross, but no ham radio and no CERT. So we are on our own if we go out to do a disaster response, but we have no idea if we're going to be covered by DSW, because you talk to the fire district, they say, oh, that's the responsibility of the city. You talk to the city, they say, oh, that's the responsibility of the fire district, or they say that we are relying upon the county to do something, and perhaps the county is an umbrella organization. So you ask them for the documentation to show, who's doing what, and how would someone, as I said, file a report if they become injured and you get nothing. It's not fair to ask volunteers to go into harm's way to rescue somebody from a burning building, and then if they, become injured in that process, they don't have anything that resembles workman's compensation. That's not fair. And once volunteers realize that they're not covered, they're not going to volunteer.
Okay, let me move to some other speakers who make a call for other comments or any board questions that Tom Pressing has his hand raised. Michelle, may I just go ahead and call on Tom?
Give me a minute. I have to give him the permission. Give me one moment. Okay. Tom, you should be able to, there you go.
Thank you, board members, chief, and everybody who's on the call, and the community volunteer leadership. So I've been listening very carefully. And so here are my questions. Who calls up our CERTs? And I've never gotten a really good answer. I know in Atherton, because we report to the chief of police, which is the usual individual you report to, then he calls us up. However, there is, among all of the town and city councils, there is a issue of risk reward, and there's a risk aversion for DSW. So without DSW, as Dennis is pointing out, then you have a problematic call up. So even though we may have an Atherton, the ability to be called up by our chief, and he did call us up for COVID, obviously, and we were very proud to do so. Without a DSW designation in the future, he may not be able to call us up. Generally, a CERT organization reports to a police department with his fire department doing the training during the year, and that we have a district and we do not have city police chiefs except Atherton taking that role. So my question is, in lieu of the chiefs of police, if there's an MOU in place, can the fire district call up certs? I've been told by several folks that the district cannot call up certs. So if the district can't call up certs, whether they have DSW designation or not, then the crux of the matter gets to the chiefs of police and the city's ability to realize there's risk in all of our lives and have that DSW process be part of the call up. How does the district contribute to the training of non-certs within a community organization? Or is it cert only? And if you do that, you limit your response capability. ADAP was successful because though 60% of our folks were certs, 40% weren't, and we were able to train them. What has been the distribution of the $1.4 million budget? And how can the district help the unincorporated areas work with SMC OES to come up with a call-up program for them, assuming they have DSW? Because right now there's no protocol for the 7 unincorporated areas of the district. So those are my concerns, just having listened to all the conversation. To me, it comes back to who can call up a cert, and can the entity that calls up the cert also designate DSW, without which calling up a cert is not likely to bring about a forthcoming result. Right now, we have 28 signed up certs at the last communication from MPFPD OEM. We have 28 certs for the 90,000+ individuals in our county. So those would be my areas that I'd like to see the fire district board and MPFPD OEM, as well as the volunteer organizations, solve. The key is, right now, if a disaster were to happen tonight, Atherton could call up ADAP, Chief McCauley could, but will he deploy them? Because there is a reluctance for DSW for all certs in this fire district. Thank you.
Okay, further questions from board members? Any of this?
Chuck?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, so
Maybe-
yeah, that, I have been a proponent of this DSW thing. And Mark, is there any way that we can look into this, just to have a better understanding? I mean, I brought Ari DeLay into a meeting, well, to speak about this. And I've talked to Dan Belleville about this, and I think he was going to give Harold that information just for information purposes. So I don't know if we can look into that DSW designation, which is something I've been pounding on the table for probably the last
Yeah,
4 or 5 years.
I have something I can share, and Andres just sent it to me earlier today. And it appears that the San Mateo County Emergency Services Council unanimously passed a resolution which will potentially allow us to do just what everyone's been asking for. And that is even have a fire district be able to swear in DSWs. So stay tuned. I mean, it's a little premature, but I know everyone's been talking about that. And that sounds like it could be an incredibly powerful thing for us in order to be able to stand up and direct CERT members, have the protection of DSW status, so yes. And like I said, this just came out today, so it's very new. I don't want to get anyone too excited, but I'm a little bit optimistic in reading that.
Well, so what group was this? That's San Mateo County, what council?
It's County's Emergency Services Council.
Oh, okay. Okay. And so who's on that exactly? That council?
Oh, I don't know if Andres can come up and share or not. I I don't know enough about it. But it.
He may have shared that in the volunteers meeting, which unfortunately I missed.
Yeah.
I don't
The
know.
The email came from Patrick Halloran. So.
Let me
Anyway.
expand. I'd like to expand a little on this because this was something that when Rob and I were on the Emergency Preparedness Committee, we had this looked into by attorneys and by other staff people. And there's some problems at a couple of levels. I mean, one level is the fire district has kind of no authority to do anything in a disaster in terms of state law. That's all vested in the local jurisdictions. So the fire district doesn't have any role in that. However, we learned that the fire district could negotiate an MOU with jurisdictions whereby the jurisdictions could delegate some of their responsibility. They could delegate some of their duties or tasks to the fire district. They could never get rid of their responsibility. That was always theirs, but they could delegate some of the tasks as they do now. For example, a police chief may delegate a captain to take on that responsibility or something of that sort. So all of this resided with law enforcement in the jurisdictions. And as a result, there was also the issue that because it was workers' comp, you had to maintain these boundaries around the city, and the coverage only included people in the city, so that if you mobilize somebody from Atherton and they happen to go into Menlo Park, they're not covered anymore. So there were problems about it. It made sense to somehow do this on a regional basis or on a district basis, but nobody had ever taken the initiative, and the jurisdictions did not seem very interested in delegating their authority. They wanted to keep that. So that's what we learned as of now. Now, what the chief is talking about is something entirely different, where they're doing something apparently at a county level, where the boundaries are much larger and so forth. So that it's an interesting thing to learn about.
Right.
The fact was we always could do something there. And I just had one other point about it, and that is, to me, the most important role of CERT is to respond immediately to an emergency where there's no time to mobilize or to get the communications out. I'm talking about within literally a minute of like a major earthquake. And go back to the Loma Prieta earthquake, where we say nobody will respond to emergency. The fact is, all those people in Oakland, and that was not a wealthy community by any means, were getting the ladders from their backyard and climbing up onto the collapsed freeway and crawling under cars and rescuing people because they were heroes and they cared about others, and they weren't motivated by PSW and so forth. So I hope we can also appeal to the people who would just respond no matter what without waiting for being called up. Okay, I'm going to keep quiet. Virginia, let me go to Rob for a minute and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead, Rob, please.
Thanks, Chuck. This is, as you know, when we were on the emergency prep committee, we try to get the verification on a lot of this, especially the DSW designation. The county emergency prep or management committee or council that they have, there are no special districts that are members, and the authority that they use for that committee for the county is that special districts do not have the authority in an emergency under California statute. So, Chief, that is I don't know if the county is going to take responsibility for the communities within the county, including the special districts. That'll be a great thing if they do that. But I will stand by. I know the legal argument that when Chuck and I were on the committee, I know there hasn't been any changes in the California statute. So that would be something that would be very, very well received and very cooperative for the county to designate or delegate their authority as a county entity to all of us within the county special districts and cities and communities. So I'm I'm excited with that, Chief. So I'm ready to go forward with it. Thank you, Chuck, Chief.
Virginia, please go ahead.
Yeah, Mark. So actually, I was the board president when, I wanted to bring this up, which I'm so glad to hear about this update. And I understood, just like what Chuck said about the MOU. I'd have done the research, and Dan Belleville, I asked Dan Belleville what we could do since we're a district, what kind of authority the county had, especially him, since he was the head of OES at the time. I think it was, yeah, at that time. But it sounds, and so I knew about the MOU situation, and I'm glad to hear that this could be a possibility. I think it'd be a tremendous opportunity. This is exactly what I was asking Dan about in 2019. And I'm just wondering, when do you think you'll get a definitive answer? Because I mean, like I said, this is a long time in waiting. I mean, at least for me, that's why I brought up Ari DeLay, because La Honda Fire Brigade is a volunteer organization.
Sure.
Got the MOU from the county through Cal Fire. Well, the not even, I think it's San Mateo County Fire, not even Coastside Fire, to have DSW designation. So Ari DeLay at the time could literally swear people in on the spot if needed. And they were an all volunteer fire brigade. So when do you think this, and is there anything that we can do as a fire board, or is there anything that volunteers can do if they're inclined to do so, to kind of say, yes, let's do this, encourage this?
Well, like I said,
this would be a huge help.
I'm still digesting what I have here. It looks like it was done via a passing of a resolution by this Emergency Services Council last Thursday. In it, I mean, within a week, we should be able to have some good clarification on what we can do. But I mean, here's some language that's in here from the group. It says the DSW oath can now be administered by any CERT program coordinator, emergency manager, or fire law command staff. That's somebody at the lieutenant or fire battalion chief level or above. This can be in San Mateo County, as long as the CERT program is recognized by Cal OES and FEMA, and there's no jurisdictional boundaries. You can move throughout the county and be covered. So
I think I'm thrilled.
awesome.
I'm thrilled. It's about time. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
So I wish I could take credit for it. Like I said, somebody did it without even me knowing about it, but we will get some details. We'll take a look at it and share it broadly amongst all of our volunteer groups.
Well, if Dan Belleville is involved with this, because I had extensive conversations with him about this, please thank him.
Okay, I'd like to move now toward the last item on the agenda, which is some wrap-up questions from the board. We have about 15 minutes remaining, and I said about 2 minutes, so I think 2 or 3 minutes, and then cut it off. So if you could please keep it to that, no more than 3, because it'll go over 15 minutes. So Michelle, if you could cut off anybody, please, at say 2.5 minutes, I would appreciate it.
Will do.
And I'll start in the same order as before with our Vice President, Rob Solano.
Thank you, Chuck. And once again, thank everyone that's on the call and has participated in our discussion. And I think I've said enough tonight. So thank you all. That's all I have to say, Chuck. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Virginia?
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. And thank you to all of the volunteers who are in this meeting, and for caring so much and taking the time not to just be at this meeting, but to do what you're doing. I think I've said enough too, but I also, this whole thing with the DSW thing, I'm thrilled. And so I do want to thank Rob and Chuck when they were on the emergency prep committee, for looking into this as well. So thank you, Rob and Chuck. This was a few years ago, and it's like I'm thrilled that this is hopefully I'm keeping my fingers crossed that this is gonna have a good outcome. But I also wanted to thank Andres. He and I talked about the DSW designation possibility, and Andres, you were very helpful in giving me some information. I'm just hopeful and praying that this will happen. So Mark, please keep us up to date. I mean, I think this will help. This is my personal opinion. I think this could help our volunteers a lot.
Okay, thank you, Virginia. Robert Jones, if you could go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. There's a couple of things that I want to highlight or point out that clearly there's a lot of things that came out, and what I heard tonight was about 4 different things. I'm just going to give you what I heard, and then I think the board is going to have to kind of figure out how to wrestle with it. The first one, which it seemed like that the district seemed like, based on the conversation, can hear from a clear message from the district regarding emergency preparedness and what that really, what is it, and how it coming up with a plan that overall will have one message going out to all the cities, CERT groups, and regarding emergency preparedness. The second thing I heard was the district can play a role in getting content for the emergency preparedness education a little bit more robust, as well as identified well in advance. It seems as if, so as to be able to any marketing campaign that go out to the community that can go out with the local CERT groups being highlighted as the group, putting this information out of what's available in conjunction with the district, because it is a partnership that we're trying to develop. I think we're trying to develop with between the district and the local CERT groups. The other thing I heard was that the CERT groups need money. The city hopefully can be a partner in providing resources, but the district has certain opportunity to participate in that also. How much and what the process is to, as well as the procedure and the policy, the board has to focus on in order to make that happen. Right now, we don't have anything other than just a conversation about it. The last thing, what I think I heard, the DSW covered that more exciting news from Chief Lorenzo talking about what has happened at the county level, but it's about also translating that into the local level, either working with the cities or working alone as a district in making that happen. I think the preference, I know my preference with my city is to be able to kind of work with that city to make things happen. And I think every CERT group, Atherton has a good relationship that's going on. And I think Menlo Park and East Palo Alto would love to have that same. Is how do we bridge that gap? How do we develop the relationship?
2 minutes has passed.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Michelle. So the last thing I want to say is along that line is that there needs to be this one message coming out of the district to the cities, and we need to figure out what that message is, what the fire board need to come up with in that message, as well as in its relationship and partnership with the community, with the local CERT groups, and what kind of support we're gonna as a board provide to the local body. So I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay.
Jim?
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. You know, as with the rest of my colleagues, you know, I'm anxious to learn more about this DSW issue and is the authority to activate and control volunteers being expanded. I'm also anxious to learn more about the City of Menlo Park and their hire of emergency prep personnel. I'm not sure if I knew they were interested in looking for one, but it sounds like it's up to 3 now. So I'm encouraged by that. And I think as that evolves, we need to work very closely with the city so that we're not duplicating efforts and making the best use of public resources and most importantly, making the most effective use of the volunteer groups. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I would like to thank everyone who showed up for the meeting tonight and who spoke and added to this. I think it's helped our understanding of the issue, and it's clarified the kind of things that we can do. So thank you for showing up. It's funny, I try very hard to be a rational human being and to react politically correctly and so forth in these things. But I perhaps spoiling a potential kumbaya moment here, but I have been on the fire board for 8 years. And so I'm much of the problem here, but I'm discouraged that we've spent, for example, on our disaster preparedness, I don't know the exact number, but it's over $6 million in the last 10 years. And I think we have very little to show for it. And I would like to do something here. Here, volunteer groups are asking for 10,000, 20,000, 30, whatever it is. And we've, in my view, squandered 6 million with no appreciable results. So I'd like to change that, and I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to do that. And I'm reminded, I share some of Dennis Parker's frustrations about this. So and Jim, in terms of wanting more from our cities, I want the same thing. And I have to tell you that one of our, well, it was East Palo Alto published its emergency plan when I was helping the city there. And it directed its workers in a disaster to meet at the San Mateo River. It turned out this plan was developed by our staff and then given to the city of East Palo Alto. It was passed by the city council and accepted as the plan. And I read it, and I had the feeling perhaps I was the only person to read it. And I decided I wanted to find out where the San Mateo River was exactly, because I'd never heard of it. And after some research, I learned that there was one in Brazil and there was one in the Philippines, but I doubted that that's where East Palo Alto workers were going to meet. And this was a product of a joint cooperative kind of venture. And to me, I'm not satisfied with that kind of performance. I think we need to do a much better job if we're going to save lives in a real disaster. So I think there's a lot of work to do. We've seen the light of in terms of some of the things we can do. And I hope
2 minutes has passed.
And I will stop there, but I hope we will all work together toward a more effective end. So with that, there's no more public comment or anything like that. Is there any last, not comments, but reminder or anything I need to do before we adjourn the meeting? Michelle, is there anything else we need to do here as part of our process?
Nope, the last thing is adjournment.
Okay, well, we're at 8:54 in the evening, 6 minutes before our deadline. Congratulations on everyone. Thank you for holding to your time limits. And we will continue the discussion. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting.
Right.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.